Hey folks, welcome back to Noclip. Danny here, your host for this week's proceedings. And this week I'm delighted to be joined by a friend, a compatriot in the world of video game documenting in many ways. Although we're here to talk about something that we have never done here at Noclip, which is produce an actual bona fide film. I'm delighted to be joined by Josh Tsui himself. Buddy, how you doing? How are things?
Good, Danny. Thanks for having me on, and things are great. Kind of, based off of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, all things considered, we're recording this a little bit ahead of the final sort of push for your movie in Sir Coin, which we're going to be talking about all about the history of Midway. So we don't know when exactly this is going to go up. So who knows? We're a week out from the election right now. It could be way worse, better, different. Who knows?
Hopefully better. Yeah, we'll we won't be in a bunker somewhere.
Exactly. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. There's a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about because this project, for those who don't know, it's very, very interesting. You've been working on it for a number of years. It's the history of Midway. It sort of charts a fairly sizable, piece of history, with the sort of the I feel like the meat and potatoes of this one being sort of like some of the early Williams stuff, then into Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, all of these classic games. But before we get into the filmmaking side of it, the most interesting part of this from a production side is that you were obviously part of that story. You were a developer at Midway, and in that sort of area for many, many years. So tell me, first of all, what's your sort of game development history? Tell me the truncated version, not the hour 45-minute version.
All right, I'll do a very quick version of it. So yeah, my first job pretty much out of college was at Midway Games in the early 90s. A friend of mine was working there on, at that time, a Jurassic Park game that ended up being something completely different. And they had just come off the success of the first Mortal Kombat. So they were delving into the whole video digitization thing. And I was coming out of film school, and my last year in film school, I got into digitizing video and playing around with the computer. So it's kind of like, interesting timing. So I got hired there back in I think it was like 93. And that was when things were starting to boom. The Mortal Kombat 2 was about to come out. NBA Jam was already out. And I got to work with the NBA Jam team, who at that time transitioned into making a WrestleMania game. So they hired me to be what they called back then a video artist, work on those games. I was basically a pixel pusher. We did everything from characters to environments and so on. And so I was at Midway all through the 90s. And then in 99, me and co-creator Mortal Kombat, John Tobias, left Midway, started up our own studio, called Studio Gigante, did a couple of games for the Xbox system that was just coming out at the time. After that, I ended up at EA Chicago, worked on Fight Night Round 3 and an unreleased Marvel game.
What a game.
And then after that, yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's still one of my favorite experiences. And then from there, did a few Tony Hawk games, did a bunch of mobile games and Connect games, all kinds of stuff. And then now that brings us to the present, which I took some time off from games and worked on this documentary. And here I am now talking with you.
Yeah. So because I've been hearing about this for a long time. I think a lot of people have been talking about this, especially in our sort of circles, right? Like Noclip, our community is a very sort of particular community of, the Venn diagram of people who like video games and people who like video production. And then a lot of them are sort of right there in the intersection. So I've been aware of this project for a long time. But how long have you been working on it? Because to me, it seems like one that has been around for quite a bit.
Yeah, for quite some time. I mean, it's, off and on. The total length of time was almost 5 years, okay. But that wasn't full time. So, I had started a Kickstarter project in 2015, and I had gotten a bunch of interviews to make the trailer, and I actually probably had enough footage to make the whole documentary just based off of that. But the Kickstarter campaign went really well for me, and then it dawned on me that I need to kind of reshoot a lot of things. There might be more people I want to shoot, so I kind of started over again and started shooting in 4K because the original one's HD. Nice. I learned a lot. I know you'll find out I learned a lot as I was going along. I was like, it's just guerrilla filmmaking. But in terms of like, if I was to distill it down to actual full-time production, it was probably about just under 3 years. Cool. Because I kept it was kind of like I had a day job most of the time. I would work on at night. I at one point I actually left the project for about 4 to 6 months, I think, just because I was so burnt out on. I came back, and that was like a very smart thing for me to do. And so officially 5 years, but really it was probably like 3.
Awesome. I guess it is a personal story. You're not in the production much yourself. Are you in it a couple? Is there a couple of shots of you Sub-Zero?
Yeah, in the fine tradition of Midway, we put a lot of Easter eggs in the film, and so if you search hard enough, and I kind of did that on purpose. Back then, Midway was really known for putting in Easter eggs and secret codes and things like that. So I wanted to kind of capture that spirit. So and I didn't want to put myself in the documentary. It would come off very egotistical, and B, I'm interviewing some of the titans of the industry, and there's no way I was going to put myself anywhere, at that level. So I put myself, back then at Midway in the 90s, I was probably like one of the only Asian persons in the entire studio. Okay, this is the 90s, So anytime they needed an Asian face for a character, it most likely it was my face on the characters. And so in the documentary, anytime I was able to get footage of myself as a character in the game, I put it in there.
Right, yeah, you were famously you were Sub-Zero in like some of the cutscenes, right? Whenever they showed like a face.
Yep. And that was in Mortal Kombat 2. It's Sub-Zero's ending. They used my face in there.
Right, and then also you were Liu Kang in 4. Is that right?
Yeah, in 4. Yeah. And both instances were like MK2, Sub-Zero's ending. I think it was like my first week at Midway, and John Tobias came by and he's like, "Hey, can I take a picture of you? I need a face for the game." So yeah, sure. It's like John Tobias. I'm not going to say no. And then he takes a picture, and I later find out I'm in the ending. And it's the same thing happened. Yeah.
I also feel like more Sub-Zero is probably the most common ending people. Is he? I feel like he's probably like the most played character.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, Sub-Zero and Scorpion are probably tied for the most popular. So yeah, it's it was quite the honor. And like for MK4 is the same thing. It was they just took a picture of me, texted me on. And the funny thing is that my kids never knew about this stuff. They knew I worked on games and everything. And it was fairly recently they saw Mortal Kombat 4 at a hot dog place of all places, and they saw my character in the attract mode getting a fatality. You were kidding. And they looked at me and they're like, "What the hell is that?" I was like, "Don't tell your mother. Whatever you do, just don't say anything about this."
Johnny Cage is punching your head off in front of them, and they're like having PTSD. Oh my goodness. So I want to talk video production. There's a lot of stuff. I kind of don't want to get too much into the weeds on the story itself because I don't want to step on the toes of the film, and I think a lot of folks who are sort of Noclip in our community will certainly be interested in checking it out. We'll get into a little bit at the end, but while we're on the subject of the Easter eggs, obviously you sort of played those characters, but also you managed to be part of one of the most wonderful game developer Easter eggs of all time, which is that you are a playable character in NBA Jam. That has got to be just I can't imagine anything cooler. Like, I'm sure Bill Clinton's probably still thinking it's the best thing that ever happened to him.
I think so. I mean, it was again, it was just one of those things where it's like everything was so informal. So it's just kind of like, right. Hey, wouldn't it be awesome to just put ourselves in there, And we were very giving about things back then. It'd be like, yeah, if you want to be in the game, we'll put you there. There's no agendas or anything like that. There's no plan. And so I think it was literally, hey, you know what? Today, anybody who wants to stop by the shooting studio, we'll put you in the game, and then we'll put your code and everything. So that's a lot of fun, and it was amazing. I just saw the this new arcade 1-up set, those mini arcades that are out there, and a friend of mine got one, and I was like, I'm wondering if I'm in the game. So I asked him punch it in, and he's like, dude, what are you doing in this game? So the legacy continues.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean, Mike Micah is in the documentary, and Mike Micah's team here in the East Bay were the ones who did the software for those cabs. So he's good. He's a good guy when it comes to making sure that video games are preserved the way they should be.
Yeah. They're the best at it.
Yeah, for sure. It was cool to see him. A bunch of other folks in here. Andrea Renee, my good friend Jeff Gerstmann in there as well. Some some really cool talking heads, and of course some of the biggest luminaries of that era, massive names that, you know, folks like, I mean, Eugene Jarvis was, I think, one of the first people who was in it. Mark Tamel, of course, pops in with his cool hair. But also Neil Nicastro, who I'd never seen an interview with, I don't think. Which was really interesting. So can you give me an idea of like the story that you wanted to tell with this, right? Because projects like this scare the bejesus out of me because there's so much, right? You really have to kill your darlings to try and get this into a runtime under 2 hours, I'm sure. So what was the story you wanted to tell, and did you end up overscoping it and having to trim it down?
Yeah, all of the above. So the story I wanted to tell, I mean, really, it was, when I look back on it, it was going to be very clinical in nature. It's just like, we're just going to go through all these hit games and talk about the making of them, you know. And you know, this is my first, you know, feature film that I've ever done. So I really was just like, you know, I'm going to go in this direction, you know, interview each person about each game and just kind of segment them off. It's almost like a bunch of mini movies. And I was told by other documentarians, it's like, yeah, you know, the one thing that you want to do is you want to keep yourself open to the story. You might have a certain agenda, but you want to let the story develop. It all develops in the editing. And so I kind of took that to heart. So I kind of knew what the overall arc was going to be. And it was, you know, it was the rise and fall of arcades in the 90s. So that was pretty, you know, well spelled out. But what ended up happening is that, you know, you mentioned Eugene Jarvis. The Eugene Jarvis story is the one that really started coming out. It was like, hey, here's this guy who made incredible games in the 80s. And then there's the video game crash, and he comes back to try to rejuvenate this company in the 90s. And his attitude and the way he put this team together, even it basically created the entire Midway games personality, right, just based off his personality. And so that kind of, without giving too much away in the movie, that kind of became the theme of Midway. And so I found that story probably around like halfway through editing, you know, and I had, at one point, I mean, I had this 4-hour cut that had every single game that we talked about. And I knew that it wasn't going to happen that way, but I had to go through this horrible process of having the gigantic movie and then trying to figure out, well, what's the underlying theme, you know, throughout all of these things. So it started out that way, and then started, you know, as you know, just start, you know, cutting it down and down and down. And yeah, you know, that whole phrase about killing your babies was incredibly painful. I mean, there are, you know, and I think, you know, in the film, we have around 12 segments. And I think in overall, if I were to have a very long, boring director's cut, that's like an encyclopedia, there'd probably be like 27 chapters altogether. And you know, and different parts got cut out for different reasons. You know, some of the stories were kind of repeating the same themes as other segments. And there are just some things that I think, yeah, maybe the diehard fan would like it, but it slowed things down so much that it just didn't make any sense to keep it in there. So it was on a case by case basis on how we, you know, cut everything down.
What was the hardest cut?
Oh, the hardest cut was there were two, but the biggest one I think was the WrestleMania one.
Yeah.
That was my first game. That was the first game I ever worked on, and to this day, I still say that it's like the most incredible experience I ever had, just because we brought in the wrestlers to the studio, and each of them had their own crazy personalities. And you're talking about back then it was the WWF, not WWE, but it was wild. Like, you know, Undertaker comes in, and we had to, you know, I had to run to the supermarket at 9 a.m. to get him a bottle of Jack Daniels so he can wake up, you know, for the shoot. You know, Doink the Clown, the original Doink the Clown, was going through a divorce, and in between shoots, he's yelling at his wife and his lawyers and things like that. So
what was Bam Bam Bigelow like? Was he okay?
Bam Bam was great. Oh, no, Bam Bam was great. They were all great people, you know, but Bam Bam was amazing. And I don't know what, I think he decided that I was going to be like his pet monkey or something, because at any opportunity he would, you know, pick me up and throw me on the mat, and or he would just do something. Like one time he literally grabbed me by what I thought was by the neck and picked me up off the ground. But being a pro wrestler, he knew how to pick me up to make it look like it was from my neck, but he actually had my back and then was
Wow.
holding me up. But I was like a rag doll. The guy was just like just decided to throw
It's a
me
big
around all
guy.
the time.
Got
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
That's incredible.
the
Yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
WrestleMania, I can see that because that's a game that was near and dear to my heart for sure when I played it on the Mega Drive in Europe. What was the
oh my
other hard
god.
cut?
Yeah, there were a couple of Mortal Kombat stories that we got into, and I still think they're very interesting points. And one of them was basically the lawsuit that the actors had against Midway, and that was a big deal at the time and stuff. And there's still it's kind of weird. It's like 20 plus years later. There's still like some weird blood about that.
Right.
But it was one of those things where it is super interesting to watch, but it went within the cut itself. It just ground everything to a halt because it was such a weighty issue, and so to do it justice, it would have like trampled over everything else around it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like it's all about the pacing, and as painful as it was to cut them out, it's like once they were out, then it just everything flowed a lot better.
I can see how, especially because that's like the first half of the movie. I feel like the Mortal Kombat stuff rounds out around the midpoint. Maybe I can see how you can end up, like bogging yourself down. It sort of destroys the pacing for the next. It's almost like it's its own movie, maybe, or it's
exactly
it's the second act conflict in a Mortal Kombat documentary or something, but it's not.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to avoid, like because it was really about that era. It was about the entire catalog of games and how it hit a certain peak, and then it kind of petered out because they were starting to repeat themselves and such. And so, if I had any, if I put a bunch of, let's say, the NBA Jam sequels or the NFL blitzes and then things like that, then it would have been a sports, a movie about sports games, So it was like this weird balancing act I had to deal with.
Yeah, it's really tough. Like I said at the top, it's the type of project that I often stay away from because I'm so intimidated by it, because it's so difficult to try and trim any of that stuff out. You interviewed a lot of amazing people. I want to talk to you about them in a second. Like I said, Neil Nicastro being one that stood out to me. One notable admission, Mr. Boone himself. Just not interested, or it doesn't want to, like his.
I talked.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh no. I talk. I mean, I talked with Ed, a lot, and I talked with him during the shooting of things and stuff. And he can't really get into it, but it's he's the face of a major franchise, and he's working for Warner Brothers, and there's just it just gets all kinds of issues can arise from it. So I had to respect him on that, and and so I wanted to make sure that he gets represented as well as possible, even though he's not in it and such. With that said, this kind of goes back to a conversation we had before, was that I didn't want it to be a Mortal Kombat documentary and stuff. And so every person has their time in there, and I didn't want to overweigh it too much, with one or the other. So it is definitely an elephant in the room, but I felt like I did a good job navigating those waters and keeping the focus on the game and not individual personalities.
Yeah, and like you said, there was a couple of lovely moments. Mark Duhamel talking about how much royalties they got paid and their contracts and stuff. Like I can see with the story you were telling, where people were it seemed like everyone has been, they're off the hook. A lot of time has passed. Like everyone's off the hook except for Ed, right? Because he's still carrying the torch for that in many ways.
Exactly.
But everyone else is kind of just shooting the shit. Can I talk? One of the parts that stood out to me was around the end when we're talking to Mr. Castro about the suing anyone who left the company stuff was wild. Like, especially kind of in today's labor market, the idea of, basically like frivolous lawsuits against startups that left Williams Electronics just to disincentivize people from doing it. What was it like talking to him?
Yeah. Oh, it was amazing. So you mentioned earlier that you've never seen an interview with him before. He's never done an interview, and in all honesty, I didn't think I was going to have him in the film. And it was just blessed timing. Enough time has passed, since Midway closed and things like that. So that distance helps. But it was, what ended up happening was that both Neil Nicastro and Ken Fedezza, who's the VP, he also has done very few interviews. I had interviewed a sizable number of people at that point. And so word, it's a small industry. So word had gotten out that, that basically I was doing this, but everyone had a good time doing it, because they're talking to somebody that they worked with. So there was a trust there. And so I think, so basically Mark Lafredo, one of the people that's in the documentary, he asked me, have you talked to Nicastro yet? So I know I haven't. So, well, I'm going to give him a call. So he calls him, gave a ringing endorsement, and next thing I know, Nicastro's like, all right, I'm in. Meet me at my beautiful condo in Chicago and stuff, and it was amazing. But I'll tell you, the candidness of what he said shocked me. I mean, he was like. A lot of it's in the film, but a lot of the stuff that didn't get me in the film, he just let it all out. I mean, he's just like, hey, I'm done. I don't need to worry about anything, so I'm just gonna let it all hang out. And I think that was the attitude for a lot of people in the film. But yeah, it's like this is the '90s, so f your work-life balance. I don't care. It's like, you want to leave, I'm gonna sue the hell out of you. And that was the attitude, and it happened a lot. And here's an interesting story was that when me and Tobias left Midway, we were under this 1-year clause. And so we didn't work in games so we took a 1-year break from games. And, we were almost positive that they were sending spies to watch us, to see what we were doing, to make sure we weren't making games or we weren't talking to people and things like that. And we were a little paranoid at the time, but we're pretty sure that that's what was going on.
Like on your probation officer was checking you, make sure you weren't like...
Exactly. And the irony of this whole situation was that when we took that year off, we were just doing freelance stuff. We knew we were going to leave, but we weren't going to be able to work for a year. So we just did some freelance stuff here and there. And the irony is that in Midway's creative media department, that's where they make all the promo videos and everything. And one of their main editors, who's also a freelancer, he ended up secretly hiring us to do all the animations for Midway promo videos, and Midway never knew it. So even though we're banned from Midway, they were inadvertently paying for us starting up our company at the same time.
Were you worried that was like a fix? Like they were like trying to get you? Like... Maybe,
yeah. No. Well, the funny thing is that we knew the guy that was hiring us. He was very trusted. A lot of people didn't know that, and I think I mentioned the story like about a year ago. Finally telling somebody, they're like, "Holy crap! How'd you pull that off?"
It's amazing. The doc is full of those types of like little fun anecdotes and insights that I really love, and I don't want to jump too much into them because I feel like I'm just taking away some of the spoiling the flavor that you get in this story. One of them though that said to me, I loved anything that had to do with game design. A lot of the marketing stuff was very interesting, of course, with these games that ended up selling so much. There was a little bit of a reference to percentaging. The idea of in the arcade games sort of like intentionally locking down the player at certain points, which I found fascinating because it was and not that I didn't think that like end level bosses in like Golden Axe or Streets of Rage, or Smash TV weren't put there to try and get quarters, but it was more the idea that they didn't want the player to die by just a random scrub, like a random character that actually felt bad. Whereas to get defeated, by a boss, it actually also gives you a good feeling.
Yeah, no, that was and that's Eugene Jarvis. I mean, he had worked on arcade games since the 80s, and if you think about arcade games, the whole idea is trying to get the player to sink a quarter every 45 seconds. And so how do you deal with that but not make people feel frustrated, make them want to come back? And there's all the psychology involved with it. And Jarvis is he was an evil genius. I mean, he really knew his stuff. And the guy has master's degrees all over the place and stuff. And so he so with his experience, he knew that, like, all right, if you get killed easily by somebody that's puny, you're going to get pissed off. But if a boss monster comes in and he's massive and he's threatening and stuff, you feel good about getting beaten up by him. So you're more than happy to sink your quarter in. And they did that a lot in the 80s, but they really mastered in the 90s. And Midway really mastered it really well, because especially once it became games that are multiplayer or co-op games. And so you got Smash TV where we have four, I'm sorry, 2 players at the same time. You have NBA Jam with 4 players. Mortal Kombat, fighting games are amazing in that you beat somebody, you never have to pay, but the other person has to pay for you. And that type of tinkering with the economics and everything was something that they really took seriously. And if you think about it, now with mobile games, they have all these analytics that they can sit there and tinker with it, online, from afar. Back in the arcade days, they would basically have the same analytics. They would go and open up the machine, look at everything that's going on, look at the timing on things when they're testing the games, and keep tuning it constantly. And they would send new ROMs out all the time and update the games based off of all this data. And so yeah, and that's something that I really wanted to emphasize in the film, was that yes, these games are a lot of fun, but they were designed to make money. And the real art is, how do you make people keep paying without realizing that they're kind of getting manipulated into it?
Yeah, and I think the title "Insert Coin" as well, as it's obviously emblematic of the era that you're talking about, the sort of Midway story, but told through the arcade stuff. And the death of arcade sort of is largely where the film ends as well. But also, yeah, so much of it ends up being about the finances and the marketing and the psychology of it, which I think I found very interesting, because I had never seen, obviously you read articles about this sort of stuff, but I'd never sort of watched that real horse's mouth thing. I'm pretty critical of a lot of like retro style docs. They tend to be very surface level. And what I liked about this one was that obviously you were talking to people who were experts in their field and weren't scared to get into that type of nitty gritty. Which I think is what made it such an enjoyable watch. Production style, I've got loads of questions, right? Because I'm fascinated by this whole thing.
Sure.
The first one I want to ask you about is, how did you capture such clean ass gameplay? It's very hard to make that era of gameplay look sort of legitimately the way it looked, but also look good on a good screen, that's not a CRT.
Yeah.
What was your process for getting that gameplay? Especially, I want to say, in the Mortal Kombat section, where you had amazing video. You had the original videos that you had obviously gotten somehow, the archives of all the blue screen stuff, and then also you had the game. So how did all that capture come about?
So there's this gamer that worked on game, Ryan, and he had this great MAME setup to digitize everything, at as high quality as possible. And so basically what I would do is I would give him, directions on, hey, I have this move that I need replicated. And he happened to be an incredible Mortal Kombat player. So he's actually able to replicate stuff that I told him. It was amazing. There's this one, during this one montage, Liu Kang is doing this crazy moves, right? And I was like, do you think you can basically replicate this in gameplay in real time? It's like, yeah, I can do that. It's like, it's amazing. These guys are nuts. But he had a great rig, set up for recording really high resolution MAME stuff. The irony of this is that some of that stuff was too clean. So there's one of the weird challenges I had with archival materials was that the quality varied all over the place. So I would have footage that was really old but was very clean quality, but then I would have footage that was newer but was crappy quality, and I had to equalize them out. And so I had a lot of weird tricks on that. But with the gameplay footage, basically a lot of the direct digital stuff was off of MAME, and then I would basically process it to give it a CRT look. So I had to I almost had to dirty it up a little bit to get that authentic look, But it was interesting, because it was like I spent a lot of time and money cleaning up archival material that then I later dirtied up, because it was confusing people on, wait, why is something from the 80s look better than something from the 90s? Right. So I was like, geez. So then I would have to dirty up the 80s more to kind of get that visual language going.
It's wild. And I also, I do a lot of that type of stuff with various plugins on some of our docs, but I feel like I can spot it a mile away. You did a really good job. I didn't feel like there was much artificial dirtying going on. So,
oh, wow. It's good to hear.
Nice work. One thing that I'm fascinated about when it comes to any sort of commercial project, and I'm not sure how far down the road you are in this, But in terms of like clearances, right? Legal clearances, people on camera, obviously getting them to sign. But in terms of gameplay, like how did you go about doing this? During the credits, you obviously see lots of references to where you've sourced stuff.
Yeah.
But have you gone down that road yet at all?
Yeah. So So that was I was like really. I thought that it was going to be a pretty big issue, and in all honesty, the oh god, what's the fair use?
Fair use, yeah.
The, yeah, so the fair use documents that are out there, it gives, it basically codifies things. So as long as you adhere to what the fair use letter tells you to do, it's pretty easy to get clearance. And I was, in all honesty, I was a little surprised by that. So, I went through, I had everything, go through legal, and I tracked where all the files were from, whether they're personal or from Midway's archives or, from YouTube, wherever, and had the attorneys, comb through everything, with the time codes and stuff. And they would give me their opinion on, is this fair use or not? And it just depends on, is it being commented on? Is it to illustrate something that's being said? Is it on too long? Just things like that. And out of literally hundreds of shots, there were only maybe 3 issues that came up, and those are super simple to fix. And so that enabled me to get a fair use opinion letter, and then I have to go get E&O insurance, other stuff, for that. But it was, I thought it was going to be a harder thing than it actually turned out to be.
That's incredible. I had no idea. So you get the fair use opinion letter. Is that come from the lawyers, or is that? Yeah.
So it comes from the attorneys, and they watch the whole film, but they have this giant Excel sheet that I put together that logs all of the archival material and such. And then on the Excel sheet, it's does this fall under fair use? Yes or no? Is it questionable? Yes or no? And there's all these categories, and as long as they're all yes, then you're pretty much clear. And that's all the insurance company needs, is to see them. They're like, okay, and then I pay insurance for a number of years for it to make sure it's okay.
That's incredible. And does that cover you for commercial as well? If
you
were to sell
so for commercial use, and trust me, I'm learning a lot of this as I went along and stuff. But it's for commercial use, and even for promotional use. And so that so if I use a clip and use for a trailer or something like that, it's all covered underneath that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm like taking notes over here. I'm like, I've never done anything that was commercial like that.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, in many ways, it's because I'm selling the film, things like that. I need to make sure that I'm covered, with the insurance. But the fair use wise, I mean, even for let's say YouTube videos, it would be it's the same set of rules. So it's anybody that's already doing that is not far off.
That's interesting. What was there any? I'm not sure if you want to get into the nitty-gritty on this, so feel free to pass. But is there any examples you could give of something that was like kind of it was skirting up that you had to go in and like change so it fell under your fair use?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know there's so few that I don't remember. Like, well, one thing that came up recently, because it's for the bonus segments for the Blu-ray, was there's a reference to the film Team America. That Sal DeVita talks about. It's for the WrestleMania segment that's going to be as part of the bonuses.
Oh, excellent!
And they and so he makes a reference to Team America because the story is Yokozuna and him go out partying and he throws up like all night and stuff. So he talks about Team America. I have a shot. I have a shot from Team America.
Oh, I know the shot.
And the question. Yeah, right. The question was really more like, I think you might hold on this too long. You might want to shorten this down.
That's
so
amazing.
That was really the only issue. I was more concerned about the Revolution X segment with Aerosmith because there's music involved, and music rights is always a pain. But the thing is that there's a rule for fair use, which is incidental music. If it was captured within the archives, within the archival footage, then it's okay.
Wow.
If I'm overlaying music, then it's different.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I learned a lot about this, and there was there's a very famous documentary production company here in Chicago called Cartemplin, and they the Oscar winning production company, and so they were really nice to meet with me because I had some questions about fair use. And so I went in, met Gordon Quinn, who's just, one of the tops in the industry. And I told him my concerns. And he's just like, just do it. Just put it in there. It's like, you're going to be fine. Yeah, ask for forgiveness later. It's like really? But yeah, he's done
that sounds
it
like
so
a guy
many
with some
times,
good lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, it's his whole thing is just make sure obviously once you're done, have attorneys look through it. So but yeah, the Aerosmith thing was like I thought it was going to be iffy, but turned out that it was fine.
That's fantastic. We've one of our favorite little sort of stories we talk about here is there's a TV show in Canada called Nirvana the Band. What's it called? It's called Nirvana the Band, the TV show. I always forget. No, I forgot. Why can't I remember the name of this bloody TV show? I used to watch it a lot with Jeremy. But their whole I literally Google it right now. Although when you type in Nirvana, Nirvana the Band, the show it's called. And their whole thing is that it's a drama series, but that they basically like push fair use to the absolute end. And there's some clause where you can use licensed music if it is like basically integral to the story, like it is like no other song would work in this context. So I was
interesting
when the Aerosmith stuff came up. I was like, I wonder if like he was allowed because of that. But the incidental rights is that makes sense. Like what he's supposed to do, scrub it out of the. Yeah. That's amazing. That's even stronger than YouTube actually, because in YouTube they'll regardless of if it's archival or not, it'll get popped. Fascinating stuff. I can talk to you about this sort of stuff all day. What I'd like to talk to you now, I guess, is the future, right? The pathway to market for this. I was really delighted to see that you were going to be showing this during South by Southwest, and then obviously that all got scuppered when COVID cancelled the entire event. What was that like for you? It must have felt amazing, and then also just felt heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was very mixed emotions to say the least. I mean, it's interesting because when I started the film, for me it was a personal project. It was just something I was going to make, and I really wasn't planning on doing film festival circuit like at all. And so when South by happened, to me that was a value add. It was just kind of like, whoa, I got into South by Southwest. I was just it's like an Academy Award nomination. I was just happy to be nominated. And so. Obviously, so that was great, and so going to South by and and having all my friends and family go there with me and things like that, that would have been incredible. But then this whole COVID thing happened, and I know it's going to sound really weird, but I was so happy that I had gotten to that level that when South by didn't happen, I was disappointed, but I wasn't as crushed as some people may think I would be, and it might just be from my own naivety or ignorance or whatever. But it was like South by's acceptance allowed the film to get a lot of exposure outside of let's say my core audience, and it got into a bunch of other film festivals because of it. And so I'm just grateful that it happened. And so it might be maybe a year from now when all this is over and things are calmed down, I might reflect on it and think, oh man, now I'm really bummed out and depressed about it, But I think with everything that's going on in the world, it was just one of those things where I'm going to take it as a positive that I got into South by in the first place, and the film has gotten a lot of notice because of it, because it's opened up a lot of other doors, in its wake. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling now. But yeah, check in on me in a year, and I might be a wreck.
It sounds like the filmmaker's equivalent of getting invited to the cool kids party, but not actually having to go through the social awkwardness of having to go to the
party. That's exactly it. You hit it right there. Yeah, it's like oh gosh, yeah. I'm just gonna stay home and drink my Bud Light instead, and
exactly. But I'm cool now.
I'm cool now. That's all I care about.
That's really cool. So we're obviously we're recording this in it's almost November here. The film then, what does it look like in terms of release? I know you guys don't have concrete dates or anything at the moment, but what are you looking at in terms of where it'll be available? You've mentioned a physical version. That's incredible.
Yeah, so there's obviously the Blu-ray is that's what we're prepping up right now. But in terms of at the end of November, it'll be out on all the major VOD platforms. So, iTunes, Amazon, Vudu and such. And then, and it's also, we're working with Alamo Drafthouse on
awesome.
a major release on their platform. And there might be a couple of, it looks like there's going to be a couple of physical theatrical screenings also. So that's being worked on.
That's
and
cool.
so, yeah, it's blasting that out everywhere at the end of November. And I'm just, I can't wait for people to, to get at it.
Yeah, how do you feel looking back on the project? Obviously, 5 years, very long. You'll probably be very happy for it to be done and out the door and in your rear view mirror. Do you feel? What is your sort of feeling about it at the moment in terms of like the story it's telling and like its place? Do you feel like you've told a story that hadn't been told? Because a lot of this stuff has been documented. Do you feel like you managed to sort of I don't know, sum up a part of your life? Like what is the feeling of completion at the end of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big sigh of relief. I feel like I got a story that I thought is going to be interesting for other people. With any type of work such as this, there are a ton of stories out there, and ultimately, I want to put something out there that was entertaining and informative, but really more entertaining than anything else, because a great advice I got was, you're making a documentary, you're not making an encyclopedia.
Right.
And to your point, there are some of these stories have been told. There are YouTube videos out there, there's all kinds of things out there, and my goal was to sew everything together into a story, so that way people who have heard some of these stories can get the right context. It's like, how did Mortal Kombat end up looking so great? Well, it's because of all the technology from Narc and Terminator 2, and here's how it happened. And so that was super important for me to get out there. So, and these are people that I worked with and who I still really enjoy being around. And every time we get together, it's like drunk history. We're just talking like a bunch of idiots. And so to be able to put that into a film for other people to enjoy, that was a big deal for me to get those personalities out there. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I'm glad that I can't touch it anymore, because I feel like I kept tinkering on it over and over again. It's like any excuse for me to go back in and tinker on something, I would take it. But yeah, they had to pry it out of my hands and get it out. So now I have like nothing to do in the middle of the night, on a weekday. So I got to find a new project.
You may be the only person I know who can answer this final question. Maybe it's the most important question of the lot. What's harder, filmmaking or game design?
Oh man, game design. Absolutely.
Didn't even blink.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I tell people that I tell people in any industry, nothing is harder than making games. And I'm working with a lot of engineers now on some of these other projects and such. And not that the work is not hard by any means, but compared to game design and just the game industry in general, it's not even close. Like I always tell people how I know it's not to belittle what they do, but I just tell them you can't even imagine what it's like to work in the game industry. With film, one of the things, and this also speaks to why it took almost 5 years to make this, was that I wanted to become very selfish with this film. I wanted to do as much of it by myself as possible, because for me, I went to film school, which was really great, but I feel like this was like kind of getting like my master's degree,
right,
without having to pay tuition. And so I learned a ton off of it. And I shouldn't say you can't make games by yourself, but you can only make a certain scale of games,
right,
or a certain scope of games by yourself. And with film, with technology that we have now, and just some of the services that are out there, I was shocked by how much, I could pull off just working as solo as possible. Not on everything, because I know my weaknesses, but it was amazing that that it's doable.
Yeah, I'm to that point. Let's highlight that. Then the music obviously was done by somebody who you paid to make a lot of the original music. You had motion graphics help as well. But in terms of the rest of it, you've edited, filmed, interviewed.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, I mean,
wild.
It's
wild. You're a wild man.
And I knew that I was going to film it myself because there's a certain intimacy I have with these guys, and so it was like I set up a kind of like a film setup that knowing that it was just going to be me in the room with them. So I tried to make it as easy as possible. But I didn't think I was going to edit it myself, but as I was doing the rough cut and I was going further and further, and I'm sure you run into this, you just get entranced by the editing.
It's too hard to tell someone what you're thinking because you're only a quarter of the way through the thought, but you know where the thought's going.
Exactly. Yeah. So my original thought was I was going to do the rough cut and then hand it off for somebody to do the fine cut. And in all honesty, that might have been a good option. But as I was going further and further along, trying to get the ideas in my head out took so much time that I felt like I needed to kind of keep iterating on it. So that wasn't planned, but I ended up editing it. The two things I didn't want to do was audio or sound design, because coming from games, I really understand how important sound design is. Like sound design is one of the less expensive parts of the budget, but has such a massive impact on the personality of something. And so I didn't want the sound to sound cheap. And so that was one of the few things I spent like real money on was audio design.
That's excellent.
And then motion graphics. Like, I come from an art directing background, so I know motion graphics pretty well. But somebody I know who's incredible at motion graphics, he really wanted to work on the film, and so he took direction really well, but just kind of went off on a tangent. And so those two things I thought were really important to just kind of hand off.
That's excellent. When it comes to the sound design, then can I ask you what type of stuff was it mastering the interview vocals, or was there a lot of background stuff going on that I maybe didn't even?
It was everything. I mean, it's like the only thing I was concerned about when I was shooting the film was just making sure that the interviewee was had good audio. Yeah. So like I was freaking out because I was shooting by myself. So like, I'm not going to use wireless lavs. Everything's going to be wired, so I know everything's working. Because I don't want to keep track of batteries. Like it's me and another person in the hotel room, and that's it. So as long as I had clean interview audio, that was fine. But everything else, John Wong of Periscope, he went in and just added so much texture, and it's almost subliminal. Like if you didn't know better, it just all sounded natural. But he added a lot of audio to things that some archival footage even that didn't have audio, and he added things in there, and it was just completely transparent. And so, so that was like I said, that was super important. And it was like, I had been listening to my audio for so long that we went to the mixing room and he showed me what he was doing. I was like, that added an extra level of polish to the film.
All right, this is my actual final question, I think, because you just reminded me. There was, I think for people who haven't are familiar with the project, it is very surprising that this is a one-person job effectively, because it does have that quality. Like it feels like a quality production. It feels like something that I watch a lot of documentaries on these services, and you can tell the ones that have been hackneyed together by first-time directors, and like you're forgiving of them. But no, this has like a sheen and a polish, especially in the interviews as well, where it's just like the stuff that people are, the tone that you manage to strike that get people to open up and be chatty and familiar is really wonderful. But there's one piece of storytelling which I really, really liked, which I was like, fuck, he managed it. That's interesting. What Jeff Gerstmann talks about Mortal Kombat 2 being the back of a skate shop. You actually got footage of the back of a skate shop for what looked like one. Did you just go to like a Dickies store or like something and like ask them, like go to the Vans store, or did you is that like a Pond 5 thing? Like how did you pull that one off? I was like, oh, that was a really nice little touch.
So there's a skate shop in Chicago that I frequent because I like skateboarding, and I went there and was like, hey, can I, I'm making a documentary, here's what it's about. Can I shoot in your shop? And the guy's like, yeah, go for it. So I just went in and shot it, and then, processed it and everything. So
fantastic. Yeah. Well,
it was just that.
Robomoto, I should have known you were deep with the skateboarding lore. In fact, maybe this is my last question, but the Birdman himself is in the credits, but he wasn't in the rest of the feature. Will we see some of him in the bonuses, Mr. Tony Hawk?
Yeah, it's he's his story was, he's in the bonus thing at the end of the film. But I don't want to like spoil the story, but basically the story that he talks about, I was at Midway at the time when that happened, and when I heard that story, I'm like, and so I'm a kid from Southern California. I was way in the skateboarding culture already and stuff, but this is in Chicago, Midway's in Chicago and such. And I remember when I heard about this, nobody knew who he was. Everyone was like, who's this guy? But because you gotta remember, this is pro skater.
Yeah.
So he was famous, but not that famous.
Yeah.
So and I think you'll appreciate this. The reason why, so at that time I had already stopped skateboarding. So I kind of knew of him, but not really, but I was still like, the whole Tony Alva era and things like that. And so the funny thing is that I knew of him, and I can believe that, what happened and everything. But the reason why I knew of him in the 90s was because I was way into the video toaster at the time. So I was a huge Amiga computer freak.
Right, yeah, yeah.
And so I remember that Tony had done an ad for the video toaster, and I remember seeing that ad. It was a flyer that was there, and he did a lot of stuff for the toaster at the time. Yeah. And I remember seeing that, thinking, who is this Tony Hawk guy? So I kind of researched as, it's a skateboarder. Oh, that's kind of cool. He's using it to make his skate videos. And so
I think I've seen that commercial. Somehow it came up recently. Yeah, that's incredible.
I think it's popped up recently. Yeah. So I remember that, and so that's why I was probably one of the few people at Midway that was kind of like, why did you guys do that? And so I actually told Tony that story years later, and it's like, I know at that time I knew you more from the video toaster than anything else, and then we geeked out over toaster and Amiga stuff and everything. When I was in college, I was a rep for New Tech and Amiga for my college.
You're
and
kidding.
Stuff. And so that's
do you see I have for the people watching the video version, there's an Amiga 600 on my wall right there.
Oh, you're kidding me. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's the box I got at Christmas when I was 6 years old. It's not the same one, but it's a replica. And these are all these boxes here behind me. They're all Amiga games. They're all Cannon Fodder, Sensible Soccer. Well, most of them. The bottom ones are PC, but the rest of them are all
that's hilarious.
Zool and Soccer Kid, all the classics. Amazing.
But so that was that was one. But I mean, Tony's I've worked with him for almost 10 years and stuff, and just a great guy. So it was really nice of him to sit down and do that.
Amazing. You're a great guy, and it was very nice to sit down and talk to you for the past hour. Awesome stuff.
Thanks.
Insert Coin, created by Josh Tsui and a number of other people. Thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations on the film. It was great to watch the final cut. I think the latest version I've watched might be the final cut or closest to it. I've seen a couple of versions over the years. And best of luck at launch. And I hope you get to sit back.
Thank you so much.
You can never touch it again.
Yes, thank you, Danny. I will definitely never touch it again.